You can see our schedule here. So I'm going to introduce DETI Inspire, who we're hosting this. Then next we'll hear from the bigger picture from Fiona Doughton from the WECA Careers Hub. So thinking about what's been working across the region and what are the plans from WECA for the future as well. Next, we'll hear then from some experiences from companies, from Rebecca Bound from Renishaw. We'll have some discussions about what you think you might like to do or you've done that's worked. And then we'll come after a break, come back in to hear from others as well about mentoring and STEM ambassadors as well, mentoring from Ablaze and the STEM Ambassador Hub. So firstly, if we go into just an introduction to DETI Inspire. Okay, so DETI stands for the Initiative for Digital Engineering, Technology and Innovation, and it's funded by WECA. To think about the next generation of digital engineering, really thinking about virtual reality, augmented reality, machine vision, fast connections between workplaces and so on. But we're also thinking about the next generation of digital engineers as well. So we're from DETI Skills, and we've been thinking about both people in the workplace, but also people, the next generation coming through as well. So you can see we have Inspire here, Transform, thinking about further and higher education, and then Innovate, thinking about keeping the engineers that we have, but then also acting as role models and mentors for that next generation as well. And as part of that, we've been really thinking about diversity in engineering as well. So the underrepresented groups, how we can keep them in engineering and attract more in as well. And maybe geography comes into that, as we've just seen with the word cloud, that people who would otherwise think, oh, I can't do that, it's too far from me and so on. Maybe virtual work experience could allow them to connect into these careers as well, so that it becomes something they can do. Next slide, please. Always wanted to say that. So DETI Inspire, over this year, we're creating a series of activities and events linking people across the region, really trying to connect into communities and also changing perceptions of engineering. So thinking of it as a creative career where you can make a difference in collaboration with others. So you see we're partnering with STEM ambassadors, with Southwest STEM Fest, which is on at the moment. Bristol and Bath RoboFest, which is coming up very soon, the next week. And then into, we've got a series of STEM clubs starting up with children from lower socioeconomic areas, so really bringing STEM to them. Engineering Open House Day as well, working with the IET and Engineering UK as well. And then into the autumn, we're really thinking about COP26. So how can engineering make a difference to the future of our planet as well? So Explorer Dome show coming up, and also our youth engagements with Engineering and Sustainability Summit. So that's a sixth form summit, thinking about the engineering question, how might we? So how might we reach net zero 2030? So yeah, lots of activities coming up that we're putting out. And as part of what we do, we work, we run also a primary school network, and that's where this knowledge share came from our advisory board, saying, I wonder what other people are doing, what's worked, what we can learn from it. So if we move on, Anna. So these are all our packs coming out. We've mapped them to the curriculum, not just to science or DT, but thinking about other ways that children can connect to engineering. So using their math skills or their geography skills, even English, because engineering has to be communicated as well. So moving through, Anna. And we've already reached lots of children. So because of the pandemic, we also went virtual. So we developed a resource called Engineering Curiosity, which is a physical Top Trumps card pack, which we can send out to schools. If you're interested, we can send them out. STEM ambassadors can deliver them in schools. But the way we did it during lockdown 3 was the British Science Week Big Beam In. So we connected schools with ambassadors virtually for them to deliver these activities in schools. And we've got a series of TikTok videos as well for young people to see what engineers do and the diversity of engineers who do this as well. So if we click through again. So we wanted to know, what have you been doing? So these are the kind of things that we can think of that could be done virtually. We're also going to hear from what other people have done, what they've done. But if you go to that Menti poll that we did earlier, so if you've not done it before, menti.com, type in that code. But anyone who has, if you could just answer this, there's 2 questions coming up. So Anna's showing us those, I think, now.
Yep, this is the Menti screen now, so we'll see people's answers as they come in.
Have you done any of these? Maybe you haven't, but if you have, if you could vote on them. Woo! There we go. So what's popular? Q&A with employees. Yeah, so we've done the same as well.
We haven't done mock interviews, we've done actual interviews.
Yes, so you mean for new interns or employees?
Well, for prospective new staff, yeah.
Okay, yeah, no, same as well. Anna, in fact, was appointed that way.
Shall I just tick mock interviews and we count it all as part of one data set?
Yeah.
Okay.
Fantastic. Yes, we could have mock and practice and real interviews. So what's coming through? So real world challenges. So that's interesting. So thinking about actual issues that people are working on, because I think that's something that came through in our advisory board. We're talking about virtual, how can people do work experience virtually? I mean, it's just not real work. And then we realized, well, actually, we're all sat here in our rooms and it's now real work. So they are actually getting experience of what is currently real work. So yeah, good there. And we found the Q&A with employees. So that's what the big beam in was effectively, was ambassadors connecting to schools, being asked questions. And in fact, today is the Great Science Share, which is another activity that we support, which is all about young people asking questions. So questions are good, we think. And we can see their CV writing and so on coming up. So, and there's another question as well, isn't there? So what do you think worked best? You may have done something that actually thought it was terrible. So which do you think you'd would want to do again? What worked best and would you do again? Okay, so we can see them popping up again if you vote on that. Okay, so those popular ones are the ones that are coming through, aren't they? So Q&A works best, I suppose, because it's easy to deliver, and you have to think we're sat here in our living rooms as well. So it's about what we can deliver as well virtually, I suppose, as well, and what you can, what connections you can enable virtually. Talking to people is something that we can easily do, and that's coming through.
What we've found is, whilst it's really easy to have interaction, so interviews, Q&A, discussions-based challenges, we found it's really difficult to teach and learn via Teams, via Zoom. So whilst you can have that discussion, it just doesn't seem to land the same way from a CPD perspective.
Definitely. So I've been teaching engineers like that all year, student engineers. And so in pedagogy, which is like the theory of teaching, what we're missing out on is social construction. So in other words, we don't get to easily share with each other what we're learning and build our own knowledge together. Yeah. Which is the aim of, like, we'll be doing breakout groups soon. That's what we're aiming for. But it's harder to facilitate than it is in a real life classroom. Well, while we're just taking some comments before we move through to Fiona, has anyone else got any thoughts on this? Like, you know, just brief, what works, and any thoughts on that?
I think for us, the real world challenges work very well, and we have a huge amount of apprentices. So we're really lucky we're able to get our apprentices to work with our full-time students as well, and give them their experience of what it's like in the workplace and how did they get there and what did they need to write and what were the interviews like as well. So we found that was a really helpful opportunity for our young people.
So I suppose there you're facilitating that social interaction, so near peer, so they're kind of more near to their experience. They might remember what it's like more and can talk them through things more, give that social experience as well.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes if it's a young person who's maybe only a couple of years older, it's easier for them to identify than sometimes it can be some of us who are maybe in our 40s going, oh, well, when I was a lad, you know, that kind of thing. So I think that we found that really valuable.
Absolutely. So I think that's something for us all to think about. How can we still create that social experience online? So maybe that's something we can think about as well in the breakout rooms later. Any more comments before we move on?
I just say that transcribes to the working network as well. So one of my larger fears for the sort of last year and a half, coming up to sort of year and 3/4 of lockdowns, is we now have a load of people who are at the very start of their careers who haven't had the benefit of networking with the greybeard sat next to them. and you're just not going to replace that, because a 21-year-old brand new into the company isn't going to have the confidence to ask what he might or she might see as a stupid question outside of, in a Teams meeting, on a phone call. They would just tap their mate Dave on the shoulder and say, "Oh, by the way, what does that mean?" And we've lost that level of learning. And when we have really looked at this, we've come up dry with resolutions for it.
Absolutely, yeah, that informal learning and what they like, learning on the job, crafts. They call it crafts learning and so on. We don't have the answers. This is a knowledge share. Hopefully, someone else on the call will, and that's what hopefully we can find out. Or they're talking about blended learning as well. So now, hopefully people are coming back to the workplace, hybrid working. Maybe we'll have some, have that on in the room experience and keep some of the benefits of this digital experience too. But I will move on now, and we've got more discussion later. So hoping to hear from Fiona next, who's giving us the big picture about what's been happening across the Careers Hub this year.
Thank you, Laura. And it's really interesting to hear what you've been talking about. We sit on the other side of it in terms of we work with the schools. So I'm just going to give you a very brief overview of who we are. And I'm going to, again, like Laura, I'm actually going to say next topic, which is so exciting. And it's so much better than using that awful clicker thing, because I'm rubbish at it. So this is much, much better. Thank you. So moving very swiftly on, I don't know how many people have heard of us. We work for the West of England Combined Authority. Anna, can we have the next slide, please? So if you don't know who we are, I'm hoping you do. We comprise 3 unitary authorities within the Combined Authority, but it's part of the government's devolution deal, and we have a Metro Mayor who was elected in May, a new Metro Mayor elected in May. So Bristol, Bath and North East Somerset, South Gloucestershire, all part of the authority. North Somerset's not, but it sits within the local enterprise partnership, which is great. So the growth areas that we're expecting, given that WECA fund a lot of, the West of England Combined Authority, I mustn't say WECA anymore, our new mayor doesn't like it. Key focus is around that creative, digital, high-tech, health and life sciences, business and legal, business and legal and the financial insurance, very much related to the tech side of things, not to the growth of business, not to the growth of financial. It's very much about how tech is going to lead us out of this. So that fintech, law tech kind of expertise. And then that advanced engineering, although it says manufacturing, it's manufacturing in a very specific style, and it's that advanced engineering, that aerospace. I've actually got a conversation tomorrow to talk about space skills. So these are clearly the areas we expect to grow. So you can see the link with DETI Inspire. And next one, please. So we're funded jointly by the West of England Combined Authority and the Careers and Enterprise Company. I'm hoping you've heard of Careers and Enterprise, who are in turn funded by the Department for Education. But the main thing is we work with the 95 state secondary schools and colleges across our area. So that includes, your ordinary school, the mainstream schools as we define them, the special schools and the alternative provision. So that includes youngsters perhaps who are not able to attend a mainstream school for various reasons, as well as those who have recognised learning difficulties. We don't work with young people ourselves. Our role is to work with the named careers leader in each of those institutions to help them to support, as it says, to deliver a careers programme that meets the needs of all their students. And we use the Gatsby benchmarks as a framework to evidence what we're doing. So when you talk about what was the best activity and how did it work, my question would be, how do we find best? Where's the impact? And that's clearly one of the things we work with our careers leaders on. And next slide, please. So just to say, what are we trying to do? We're trying to effect systemic change within education. Careers has been part of the world for a very long time, and I haven't ever met somebody who hasn't got a career story to tell, no matter how old they are. The point is, it's happened in a little cubby hole over in the corner somewhere. What we want is something that says it's part of everything that young people do. So that focus includes You're learning your maths. How does that relate to where you might go in the future? You're learning your science. Where does that link into skills that you're going to use? It's something that every partner we work with, I think, shares, which is part of the reason why it's that. And we talk about CEIAG, so careers education. This is not just about individual meetings. It's an education strand with learning outcomes, information, advice, and guidance. So moving swiftly on, please, Anna. So as I said, I thought it'd be useful to do some scene setting and to go back to where we started. So we're talking about summer 2019, before any of this was even a shadow on the horizon. Work experience, generally speaking, happened on an employer's premises. It took place in late June, early July, with some exceptions, but that's pretty much when it happened. In Bath and North East Somerset, for example, it always happens first week of July. All of the schools send all of their students out at the same time. It's usually 1 or 2 students going to an employer. Sometimes in the cases of some of our larger companies, they'll take several students, but it's very much a one-on-one experience. You sit with an employee, you do things with that person. Generally speaking, over 5 days. And the program that might have been worked out in advance, it might be very happenstance. I would have said it's been very hit and miss. There have been some excellent examples of work experience going on in the past, but as some of the studies have proven, there have also been some fairly rubbish ones. So there's been very variable quality about work experience. My worst ever being the 2 lads that spent a whole fortnight driving around in a golf cart on a golf course. Not a lot of value in that. So, and then we came to 2020, and obviously we were in full lockdown. Most of our schools and colleges couldn't send anybody out on work experience. We'd got the few who'd done it early. Pretty much everybody else didn't get anything. And there was some sort of provision. There were some people who suddenly said, okay, we can do something. This is work experience. And we had all sorts of interesting videos and things sent out. Whether they qualified as work experience, I think I'll leave that to you to make up your own minds, but there is a definite question there. And I don't think anybody else knew what to do. You know, the career leaders in the schools and the colleges were completely floored by this. They were on a heavy learning curve about how to do Zoom and team meetings, which God bless them, they did. But for employers, again, this was a really difficult situation. Where did we go? We did a survey with our career leaders. 83% of them said, we need help. We need to look at work experience. What can we do for our students? So big problem. So we move on to 2021. Life has changed quite a lot. We're used to lockdown. We know how to do lockdown. It's great. And what we've had is some amazing offers. It's taking place virtually. It's happening on Teams, on Google Classrooms, in all sorts of different ways. Work experience is happening, but it's happening virtually. Pretty much it's being led by the employers, which is an interesting way forward. It's not about the demand from the schools. It's about employers saying, this is what we've got to offer. It's about that offer going into the schools and the colleges and then responding, which is a complete flip from where we were before. We're also talking about offers that happen after school, happen in school holidays, and sometimes happen during school. So we're not talking about something that just happens in a couple of weeks. We're also talking about sessions that are multiple students happening together. So I work for the Combined Authorities. I've said we've got an offer for work experience out there, and we're talking about 30 students coming in. Significant changes there. But then we get into the health and safety side of things. And of course, it's no longer an issue. For some of you that are on the call, I know you work in defence, security is a massive issue if you're going to offer work experience. But actually, if you're doing it electronically, it stops being an issue, doesn't it? Because you only show them what you want them to see. You can really sort of define what is available. So we can really change. And health and safety, suddenly you can take a student onto a construction site because they're not going, it's a GoPro walking around in somebody's hands or whatever it happens to be. The safeguarding becomes a real issue. And it's been really interesting to see how much of an issue that has been. That actually it's fine to send somebody out for 5 days to somebody else's premises and actually have no contact with them while they're on those premises, but it's not fine to engage them over the internet. I think there's some real challenges here about how we're seeing safeguarding, and I'd be really interested to see how you reflect on this. Some of our schools have got into a flat spin about our young people and the access that are being had. So I'd really like to hear where you're coming from on this. We've also changed in terms of what we're talking about. We're not necessarily talking about 5 days. And certainly the 3-day model is becoming very, very common and very popular. But even 1 or 2 days. Can you do full working experience in a day and make it meaningful? I'm not totally sure. I'll be honest about that. I have some concerns. But certainly you don't actually need to spend a full 5 days with them. You can actually do something that's really impactful in 2 or 3 days and works really well. Virtual work experience enables us to work more smartly. I think there's some real values in this. What we've also got for the first time ever is guidance on what work experience needs to include for it to be meaningful. And I'll come on to that in just a minute. And in response to some of this, our schools and our colleges, in some instances, have been, again, completely thrown. We're not offering something that happens as a block in a week in June and July. And for some of our career leaders, that doesn't sit well with the timetable. How do you actually manage that when you've got students dotting in and out? We all know you teach in a block of 30. There are some very good reasons for that. It works well logistically. What do you do if you've only got some students in? How do you address those kinds of challenges? So if a work experience doesn't meet all 180 students in your year group, or even in some of our bigger schools, all 300 students, how do you take that forward? There are some real challenges around that. Some of our schools have set up what they would describe as work experience days. That's often about bringing an employer in who's delivering on a project, but actually how much engagement is there? Are we meeting all the meaningful requirements for that? So those are the kinds of things we need to think about. If you go on to the next slide, please. This is what we've got that says work experience needs to meet in order to be meaningful. The first thing is, do we have learning outcomes? Again, if we go back to 2019 and work experience, was there any learning outcome? No. Were people saying, why are we doing work experience? What was the purpose of a year 10 work experience placement? What was the purpose of year 12? There was an awful lot of, we've always done this, or work experience is seen as a good thing and the evidence says we should do it. But what the specific learning outcomes were wasn't always in place. Sometimes it was, sometimes it wasn't. Do students meet a range of people from the workplace? Again, it's moving away from, well, today I've arranged that they're going to sit with Fleur and they're going to spend a week with Fleur and they're going to really get great detail on what she does. Will they get the bigger picture out of the business? Possibly not. So where is that range of people? And it may be actually with a lot of face-to-face, they did some great stuff. They did some going around. I've known some really good ones when they got to do a lot of this. But again, for virtual, this is really important. For virtual, it needs to be specified. For face-to-face, it doesn't. Extensive, two-way interaction. A video is not two-way, and a work experience placement that is solely video-based is not a work experience placement. Having video as part of it, absolutely. That being the only method, definitely not. And some of the work experience days that we're hearing about mostly seem to involve videos and not a lot of talking. You need to talk. And again, I think you've already made 1 or 2 comments about students asking questions. That opportunity to ask questions is so important, which is why when you've got some of those bigger ones happening, we need to make sure there's some small groups involved as well. And then there's already been that talk about real world or world of work, however you want to put it, but that opportunity to work on a project that relates to your business, that really gets them to understand who you are and what you're doing. So that meaningful side of things is really important. I think this guidance is really helpful because it's not a straitjacket, but it can really take us through where we're going to go. Can we move on, please? I tried to sort of frame some of the benefits and challenges. And again, I think we've already done this with the poll because I wanted to sort of think through benefits, really no transport issues. I've worked with Rebecca in the past. I know how difficult it is for Renishaw to get students to their premises. It's not easy when you're in the middle of nowhere. And actually just getting students from one side of Bristol to another is a major achievement. And it impacts significantly on those who live in some of the lower socioeconomic areas that there isn't transport to get them to places reliably. The time expectations, too much time has been spent on work experience, both from an employer perspective and a student perspective. We've got to look at return on investment here. How much time do you actually want to give? Really, really important. The benefits of that group approach, that they can work together, they can use some of those skills, but they're working with you in groups. There's so many benefits around that. You don't need me to sort of plug away at that one. that real world project, that emphasis on that real world project is brilliant to see that coming through. Asking questions virtually, young people of 15 and 16 particularly, those year 10s, it's not a good age. They don't like asking questions. They don't like sticking their head above the parapet. No, red, go. Okay, but you can ask it virtually and suddenly we're in a different ballpark. Year 12s and 13s, I think it's a slightly different situation, but really good. Is it easier as an employer to offer? Again, I've talked about defense, about security, about confidentiality, business confidentiality. There are some real health and safety issues, particularly talking about construction. There are some brilliant construction careers that students can't do work experience because they can't get there. So it gets around a lot of those issues. Already talked about security challenges. If we come into the challenges, inclusion. For those students where they've got one telephone, one smartphone between a family of 5, virtual work experience, don't even bother. It isn't going to happen. We've still got too much of that digital poverty going on. It's an ongoing problem. We're not going to solve it in a heartbeat, but it would be brilliant to think about it. If it's in school premises, it's really difficult for them because how do you get a student in a room so they can talk to you without actually having lots of background noise, that you can have a meaningful conversation with them? Similarly at home, you've got people coming in and out. I get brought coffee regularly. It's fine, we've got used to it, but it can be intrusive. All those kind of things. Is it less informative of the workplace? And this is one of my challenges. Do they really understand what it's like to come to your building, to go to your reception desk, to ask to be introduced to somebody, to really get that feel of what it's like to be in a manufacturing environment, in a garage, in a hairdresser's, to really understand how an office works and how you behave there, and to see people behaving? One of the things, I've put tasks not reflective of work timescales. One of the things that students often say when they come back from work experience, there isn't a bell every 45 minutes. You don't only work on a task for half an hour. People at work on things that take 6 months, sometimes for some of you, many more years than that. They need to learn that. And actually, again, is it reflective of the workplace? Does it provide the development of soft skills? One of our career leaders talks about the benefits of students learning how to give a handshake. You're not going to learn to give a handshake virtually. Does it matter? I think it's the question that goes alongside that. Again, the working day, do they understand the 9 to 5? If they do get to do a 9 to 5 placement, they come back exhausted. For those of you that have seen any student come from that, they literally zonk out because they're not used to it. It's amazing. It's a bit like us when we come back after a fortnight's leave and, anyway. So is it sufficiently tailored to the individual as well as the group? One of the challenges of group teaching, those of you that teach 30, how much are we meeting the individual's needs? Don't know. Again, I've talked about school timetables and calendars. There are some ongoing challenges here. And I think the final one I put on was with the lockdown, there has been a huge overload on screen time, with schools sometimes actually having non-screen days. That I think is a short-term problem, but I wanted to flag it up as a challenge anyway. And moving on, I think my questions were about the future, and I'm hoping that's what's going to come out from the discussions that we're just about to have. What happens in 2022? What does that look like? Interestingly, talking to the career leaders of the schools and colleges, they're really worried about planning for next year. And a lot of them are actually not planning for next year at the moment, which is not like schools at all. They've normally got the whole of the year mapped out by now. Timetables written, everybody knows what they're doing. Is it going to be virtual? Is it going to be face-to-face? Is it going to be hybrid? How is this going to work? Who is going to decide? Is this driven by the needs of the school? Is it driven by the needs of the employer? Is it driven by the needs of the student? The next thing I wanted to throw in, I did allude earlier on to the Gatsby benchmarks that we work to. The benchmark actually says, do students have experiences of the workplace? It doesn't ask if they've had work experience. And I realize that's semantics, but I just want to unpick that very, very quickly. So it doesn't mean to say it has to be about a year 10 and a year 12 placement. It could be that actually they do a visit, a workplace visit in year 7, and as part of that visit for a curriculum reason, they then also get to ask some questions and get to understand a workplace alongside it. That you could actually sit there and say, okay, to your local school, okay, get year 8 in, and we'll actually run half a day for them and see where we're going to go. How do we link it into the different curriculum subjects? How do we include things like insight days and other things? How can we make sure that it reflects those changes in working practices? Could it be something that runs from year 7 to year 13? And finally, how do we differentiate between virtual work experience and an ordinary meeting with an employer? Two different things. How do we make the two different? Those are my questions. The only thing I've put in the slides now is some gut reading that you might want to have a look at. So particularly there's a Careers in Context guide, which was produced by the CEC, which makes interesting reading. There's something also on working with youngsters with learning disabilities, special educational needs and disabilities. There's a guide for employers that's well worth looking at, that takes you through all sorts of things. And finally, Not Just Making the Tea is an old document from the government pre-COVID. I think it's 2015, so it's got lots of health warnings in terms of age, but actually it still bears reading and looking at. But that comment, Not Just Making the Tea, is really relevant. I'm sorry I've talked far too long, but that was just my thinking.
No, thank you very much, Fiona. It's really good questions there, and I definitely like experiences of the workplace, because that fits into a lot of, I think, what we're more offering now, rather than making tea or getting, what was it, the rainbow paint or something. That's the classic one as well, isn't it? Wonderful. So we are going to hear from a case study, if you like. So Rebecca Bound, Renishaw, hear from her, and then we're going to go and kind of ask each other questions and come back and discuss. So before any further questions to Fiona, you can always type in the chats as well, and we can store them up and answer them later. But let's hear from Rebecca for a case study of what they've been offering.
Thank you, Laura. Good afternoon, everyone. Can I have my first slide then, please? Okay, so this is just an overview of the programme that we've been running in 2021. When we're offering face-to-face, it would always be with years 10 to 13, and we've continued that with the virtual delivery. And what we've used as the platform is Microsoft Teams to deliver. Overall, we're running engineering, commercial and software. And as you can see, we've got with the engineering 140 places, and that's running across 5 weeks, and you can see the dates on the slide. And that would actually be more than what we would normally run, because normally we'd run just under 100 places for engineering. So I guess one of the benefits of the virtual delivery is that we've actually managed to offer more places this year than we would have done previously. We haven't run commercial or software yet. I'll talk a little bit about the format of those a bit later on. Those are due to run in July and August. I guess the probably next slide now, actually, talking a bit more about the Engineering Work Experience Week. So Fiona talked about a change in the number of days, and actually when it was face-to-face delivery, it would have been 4.5 days. With the virtual delivery, we have changed that slightly, and we're down to 3.5 days. So this is typically what the timetable would be. So the week would have started off with sort of get to know your group. We'd have a bit of an icebreaker session, because the way that the work experience would work face to face is that we have huge groups of students normally it's 48 students per week. And then we split them into teams. So we've kind of replicated that with the virtual delivery. So we've had teams in, and then we have done each icebreaker sessions with each team so that they can get to know their team members. And then across the course of the week, so right at the start of the week, they're given an introduction to their project brief. And then there is an awful lot of time built in, as you can see, which is the orange sections on the timetable, where they're actually working on an engineering project within their team, which would typically have 5 members. So as I say, that pretty much would replicate what they would do face to face. So I would say, picking up on the point that Fiona mentioned about soft skills, I think the format that we've delivered does actually contribute towards that, because there's a lot of team working, problem solving, leadership, those kind of things that have come into play during the work experience that they've had with us. You'll also see that there are some sort of lighter grey sections in that timetable, and those are what we'd call skill sessions. So they might be, typically there's one down there for CAD, so it may well be that the students are invited to join a virtual session where they would learn how to do CAD, which will help them in their project. And also expert talks as well. So I think someone was saying at the start of the meeting about that interaction with older people with more experience, and having that sort of opportunity to be able to speak to those people and to ask them questions. So that's why we built in these expert talks as well. So we'd have engineers that are coming from different areas of Renishaw that would talk about their expertise, and then obviously, you know, then there would be a Q&A at the end as well. The pink session is a career session that we'd run, so that would be which we'd do again face to face normally. That's just the equivalent of that virtually, where we would talk through all of our careers programs, and adding to that a session around employability skills and CV writing skills as well. And then the blue session is the final presentation. So each team is working on a project throughout the week, and then they have to do final presentations, which again replicates what they would do if it was face to face as well. And the reason it's highlighted blue is that we also invited parents into that session to hear what their children have been doing throughout the week. So that was a session that they could join. I think that's probably covered everything on there. I mean, there's a little note about some considerations beforehand. We made sure that we collected students' email addresses as well as their parents and carers, just so that they knew, that obviously their children had signed up for this week. One thing that was significantly different this year is that we have run most of these weeks across the summer holidays, and what that has actually meant from a good perspective is that the caliber of the students that have applied have been much higher than what we would normally get. So I think, as Fiona mentioned, normally the work experience programs are kind of driven by the schools, but this year, because it's, you know, it has been very much driven by us in the holidays, I feel like the students that have actually applied are those that really want to do it and spend time during their holidays to do it. So what we did do on the basis of that, we couldn't accept all of the students, obviously, so we have opened up some of our career sessions to those students that actually weren't successful to get a place on the work experience week, but still getting that access to the key careers information that they may have got had they been successful and got a place. So I think, yeah, that's probably that slide done. So can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. One of the things that we experimented with, again, I don't think this would have happened had we been running face to face, but because we were offering a number of weeks, we decided to do a pilot all-female week. And I'd say mixed results from this, really, but I suppose the interesting stats are that overall we had 263 applications for our work experience weeks. 31% of those were female, so I think that's really, you know, quite positive. 12% of the females applied only for the female only week, and 27% of the females applied only for the mixed gender week. So interpret that how you will. And then here is some of the feedback from the girls that attended. Obviously it's a small sample size because we only had 30 girls attending, and then some comments and quotes down the bottom actually about some of the obstacles that they feel that women have to overcome to become engineers. So we got some interesting feedback from the girls that did attend that week. Next slide, please. And this is just some feedback generally from the 4 engineering work experience weeks that we have run so far. Lots of interesting feedback that we've had from the students. I think they've enjoyed the task, enjoyed meeting different people, so that's good. Although they were working virtually, they still felt they had that opportunity to interact with different people, which was good. I think there's just some really nice comments there. What else have we got on there? Working with new people and getting a taste of life at Renishaw, learning about what a job in engineering would entail. Yeah, lots of different comments there, and some really nice quotes at the bottom as well. I've really enjoyed this week and have learnt so much. So I think it does go to show that the students are gaining positive experiences, and this is making a difference. This experience has helped me a lot, and now I have a much better understanding of what a career in engineering looks like. Thank you for wonderful work experience week. And to be honest, I must admit, when we decided to run this program, we had no idea how successful it would be, and I feel like the presentations at the end of the week that we've heard and some of the comments that we've received both from parents and students have showed us that it has actually had a really good impact. So I think it has been successful from that perspective. Next slide. So yeah, not much to say really about these other work experience weeks that we're going to be running, because obviously we haven't run them yet, but there will be a commercial virtual work experience week at the end of July, and then the software engineering is start of August. And the commercial work experience week, there'll be a small project there which will be kicked off on day 1, and then across the course of the week we're going to have presentations from different commercial areas within Renishaw, so hopefully picking up students that are interested in any of those fields that are mentioned there, and obviously they'll get some careers information as well. And the software, we talked a lot about whether this should be virtual or whether it should be face-to-face. In the end, we just felt, because we're of uncertainties with the pandemic, then we would have to go virtual. So that's scheduled for the beginning of August, and that will be very similar to our face-to-face offering as well. That will be a project work, and the students will be put into teams to work on those software projects. And again, we will include expert talks and careers talks as well. So I think all round I would say that it's been a very, very positive program that we've run this year. And that's it from me.
Wonderful.
So thank you for listening.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rebecca. And yeah, fitted really well with what Fiona was talking about as well.
Thank you.
Who's asked, how did you manage the teams of 5 working together?
Okay, so we had mentors who were people who had volunteered from the business. So they had come and they volunteered to look after, and again, this would happen if it was face-to-face as well. They were given 2 teams to, and the teams had their own rooms created for them, and then the mentors would be available on the chat and obviously would be able to pop in and mentor the teams when they needed any support.
And did you find
sorry,
that?
Just
You asked
that question.
Go ahead.
yeah. Sorry to interrupt there. Thanks for the talk, by the way, Rebecca. Just to clarify on that, because obviously when we've done face-to-face work experience previously, we've had all of our work experience students, we've done something similar with kind of project work and multiple teams working on projects, and we've had them all in one room, and then because obviously they were in the office, they were sort of supervised by 2 or 3 members of staff who were there at the time. But obviously if they're all on their separate Teams channels, did you have it where basically there were times when those 5 students were on the Teams chat and there wasn't on the Teams call and there wasn't someone there with them from Renishaw?
Yeah.
If someone mentioned teams, okay, cool.
When it was project work, the teams potentially could go off and just work together as a team without any Renishaw involvement, but the mentors were always on standby if they needed to be called into the room.
Okay, and that worked totally fine. There was no problems with that.
really well.
Okay.
I think, you know, at the start of the week, just as it would be actually face to face, sometimes they're a bit hesitant to get talking, but we gave them a sort of project work with criteria that they had to meet by the end of each day, and I think that kind of like motivated them to talk to each other and make sure that they were on track. So yeah.
Great, thank you so much. Sorry for interrupting.
No, that's wonderful. Thanks, Stephen. Yeah, because we've done similar with our student engineers, and we actually found they were in a student mindset, so they wouldn't start till 11 a.m. etc. And thought that was early. But you didn't find that with maybe because they'd gone through an application process, they were motivated.
Maybe, and also, you know, we did set out the expectations from the start, which was copied into parents and carers. They knew what the schedule was going to be, you know, and I feel that this kind of work experience where you are put into teams, maybe perhaps not on the first day, but as you start building that relationship and that team sort of spirit, you know, you don't want to let other people down, I guess. So, and that does seem to always happen with our work experience weeks, because I always worry that you know, team members won't turn up on the final day to help their team present, but they always do. And I think that's because we support that. We give them a presentation about presentation skills. We make sure they practice so that they are prepared for it. And although most students say that that's the bit they don't like, that is the bit that, you know, where they're stepping out of their comfort zone, I guess, and it is making a difference for them and their confidence.
Fantastic. Okay, so we would like to hear reflections from other people as well, but to enable that, because it's sometimes difficult for people to ask questions, we're going to put people in breakout rooms. I'm actually going to send you in for 10 minutes, and if we return here at 5 past just to hear from people, so you could take a comfort break towards the end of that as well. So 15 minutes of time, 10 minutes for discussions. We'd like you to discuss what you've heard already. What will you try out? What have you tried? And maybe Fiona's question as well. What's experiences of the workplace? What's an employer encounter? And what's virtual work experience? And is virtual work experience, yeah, completely different thing? So what are we working with here? So we'd like someone from each breakout room to report back to us, just to stimulate that discussion at 5 past 2. So if you bear that in mind and nominate someone to talk. Right, I'll send people off into those breakout rooms now. Hopefully this will work. Hello to people coming back in the room. Everyone's slowly closing their rooms, coming back in. And please do take a comfort break if you need one now as well. So we're running through till 2:30. Maybe you can hang on, maybe you can't. Fantastic. Wonderful. So everybody hopefully is back in the room now. So I'm just hoping for a quick summary for time, just a minute from each group and kind of a summary of what you found, what works and so on. So group 1, or do we know your group names actually? I think Joanne we were group 2, weren't we, Joanne? So whoever was in group 1 or anyone who was nominated, could you talk?
I know that we were group 1 and we were luckily in Rebecca's room. So a lot of our conversation was just quizzing Rebecca on, you know, the pros and cons of real life works experience and virtual works experience and what they were going to do moving forward and what the, you know, the hindrance of, you know, you run virtual works experience in the school holidays, and the cohort of students that are able to access it and are prepared to spend their school holidays doing it is very different to the children that would have done the week's works experience coming out of school in the fixed week. So it's, you know, we just talked about what works, what doesn't work, what they do differently, and how Stantec are going to copy their whole program.
Well, this is a knowledge
Yeah.
share. That's what it's for. So do get in touch afterwards. We're happy to connect anyone afterwards as well if there's any kind of, you want to ask further questions and so on. Thank you, Rona. So group 2, I think, was us. Joanne, would you like to feedback and also just some brief thoughts from Western as well?
Yes, thank you, Laura. So I think it was really interesting. There was a range of different employers and their approaches to virtual work experience. I think what's become really apparent is, although we may be very comfortable in having these kind of meetings and talking to each other face to face, our young people aren't. And that could be because of their digital poverty or their extended sense of self. Sometimes they don't like being on camera. It can feel as though you're delivering into the abyss. But I think that there's a lot of work being done in order to try and get them more confident in actually showing their faces, and this is going to be a usual way of working moving forward. I think the other thing I've reflected on is that for us as a college, I'm just going back actually, so for that element of it, we've got some really good learning technologists who've worked hard with our teaching staff, who through the IoT and obviously our partnership with DETI would be happy to put on a session in order to try and support those employers who are doing work placements and work activities online, to actually, some strategies on how to get engagement from young people in a virtual environment. So I'm happy to work with Laura to see what we can do to support the employers. I think on the other side of it though as well is that, as was talked about earlier, the virtual work experience absolutely opens up doors that we didn't have before. So some of the key employers that we work with, exactly the same around, they would do certain elements of work experience and work related activities. But as we're moving into the new T-level environment, that's definitely a bit, not going to be something that some of our employers can support with. But actually, I think we can really tick that work-related activity box through virtual work experience and give our young people, both on that in schools and in college experiences of different kinds of workplaces and what those opportunities are for them. You were talking about STEMfest earlier, and I've just done a podcast for them, and I think one of the key things that we were talking about was giving young people the widest opportunity in STEM and digital and engineering subjects so that they can make really informed choices. And I think talking about widening participation for girls especially, this is a much safer way for them to explore and have a look around whether this is the subject for them without wondering or feeling or not being confident by being in quite male dominated, although we're very female actually. We've got fantastic female representation here. That's the usual thing if you're talking on an operational level in engineering.
Definitely, yeah, it changes the dynamics, doesn't it? So yeah, something to think about. So group 3 finally, some reflections from you. Who was nominated? Do you know?
Yeah, that was us. Yeah, so we spoke a lot about the sort of last prompt question about having that hybrid approach going forward. And I think what we kind of agreed on was a lot of the problems with integrating the virtual come when you try to replace the face-to-face with it. So instead of sort of trying to completely replace the face-to-face, use it as a support rather than a direct swap. So for a bit of context, I work for Like2Be, which is a career event networking platform. And over the course of lockdown and the pandemic, we've been doing fully virtual events. But one event that we did sort of recently was when the schools were all back in and they had the event digitally. So they had the support in person with the teachers to encourage the engagement and add the structured lesson plans, but then had the actual digital networking and activities online. So yeah, essentially we're sort of saying, rather than saying, okay, this is face-to-face, let's fully replace it with virtual, use it as a support for the long-lasting, meaningful part. What a lot of employers might find is that after they've had their Teams call or Teams meeting or whatever, everyone sort of just goes away and the content and the discussions that you've had are kind of lost. Whereas if you have a virtual platform to support that aspect of it and have those digital materials there that are accessible any place, any time, that's when it sort of enhances the work experience rather than totally replaces it. Yeah, and we spoke a bit about sort of how we'd sort of combat the inclusion with sort of, I think we touched on it earlier, like digital poverty, making sure everyone has access to it. And I think that would just require redesigning a new way of delivering these work experiences. But yeah, we didn't have too much time to talk about that. But yeah, we mostly spoke about the hybrid aspect and what it sort of looked like in the future.
Fantastic. So yeah, thank you for that. We'll send out a document at the end with kind of like links to all the things that we're mentioning here. But I'm just going to kind of bring us onto the final stage of this knowledge share. So we've been talking about employer encounters or experience of the workplace, if you like. But next, we're just going to think about what next for young people. So from Ablaze, we've got Kerry Baz, who's we're thinking about mentoring. So Fran was just talking about those deeper connections and engagements. How can we enable and facilitate that in this environment going forward? Anna and Kerry, does Kerry have slides? She does, fantastic. So they're going to come up, and when they do, Kerry, take it away. And
yeah, 1 sec.
5 minutes as well, please, because then we're also just going to hear from Rona as well before the end. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm very, very aware of time. Okay, so can I have the next slide, please? Hi, okay, so I'm Kerry, I'm project manager of the West of England Mentoring Programme that operates through Ablaze. We also operate primary programmes and post-16 programmes, but I just want to touch on our West of England Mentoring Programme. We operate all over the West of England, so North Somerset, Baines, Bristol, South Gloss, so quite a wide area. If I can have the next slide. So basically, WEM is a group mentoring programme that matches volunteer business mentors from various businesses with a local secondary school with targeted students. The students are aged between 12 and 15, so very different from the work experience talks we've just had. We focus on pre-16-year-olds. Now, the usual face-to-face experience is held over 12 weeks, so a term, face-to-face with 6 2-hour sessions, 5 held in a workplace and 1 held in a school. And it focuses on building confidence and self-esteem, focuses on employability, career choices and pathways, building an action plan, and really sort of looking at opening up their horizons, and sort of business mentors sharing their journeys and sharing their pathways with the students, so that they can sort of have a bigger idea of what's out there and what potentially they could do and how to do it. So the next slide, please. So we, like everyone, I actually started just a few weeks in this role before pandemic. So suddenly all my diary was cancelled and we had to start thinking how we can do it virtually. So it took a long while to talk to schools and work out how we could actually do the programme virtually in a school. So we sort of talked about various models. The model that most schools ended up doing was actually having students in a big room on laptops with headphones. The business mentors we've worked with have been absolutely amazing, transferring the sort of resources that they're used to using onto an on-screen environment. And the schools either sort of had everyone on laptops, or everyone in front of a big screen, and then moving people onto laptops for breakout rooms. What really worked was if the school had somebody in the school who really engaged with the programme, because they had to be in class facilitating the session without the mentors being present. And the volunteer mentors themselves had to sort of think, okay, how can we engage these younger students online? And lots of different sort of tools were used, different types of ice-breaking activities. And we realised that virtually students, we couldn't really have these sessions for 2 hours long. So we ended up running them for about 45-50 minutes maximum, and running them weekly over a 6-week period rather than over a 12-week period. Next slide, please. So the challenges, obviously the IT issues, we had to work out bespoke programs with each school, whether they did it on Teams or Google or whatever worked for them, and also what worked with the business. Safeguarding was a big sort of crunch issue that we had to work out with the schools, particularly with our pilot programme, which was due to start with the students in school, but January lockdown came beginning this year, and we actually decided to start that programme with the students being from home. So it was a challenge, but we managed to do it. Trust and rapport was a real challenge because with students not really sort of meeting their mentors face to face, it took a little longer for them to engage and trust the mentors on screen. But actually, it's quite amazing how within a few sessions they did actually sort of engage with the mentors. Challenges in terms of practical activities, obviously in a face-to-face workshopy environment, there are lots of different practical fun things you can do. We have this sort of spaghetti team building exercise that some businesses like to use. Presentations from younger students were more difficult on screen, but the positives, and I've actually just come from a school in Bath who's had their final session, their virtual session with the mentors, and I was able to view it in the classroom. Trust and rapport was still built. We were able to engage high number of students because we could get high numbers onto laptops. From a business point of view, we were able to engage volunteer mentors from all over the business and not necessarily in the west of England as well. So from a business point of view, the networking that and the support that happened across the business, across different departments, was really, really good from a business point of view as well. Less time commitment, and also matching a school and a business location didn't matter. So I had a school in Bath where I managed to match a business from Bristol to mentor their students. Usually I would have had to try to find a local business because the students would have actually gone into the business for most of those sessions. Can I have the next slide, please? So after our pilot program, we do an evaluation after every program, and actually the results were still really, really impressive. The students felt more confident, more able to take part in discussions. It was really interesting as the program developed that more students were able to engage with the students. At first, they would only use the chat. They wouldn't put the cameras on and they wouldn't actually talk. But by the third or fourth session, they slowly started to do that. It's like dominoes. Once one or two students started to do it, then everyone felt more confident doing it. And we had there's a lovely testimony from one of the parents of our pilot program, and that last sentence always sort of gets me a little bit. It's great to see into my future, he told his mum, and that was fantastic to hear, even from our virtual program, that a student felt a lot more confident by the end of it. Our next slide, please. So what does our future look like? Interestingly, I'm just speaking to another school thinking of next year. A lot of schools do want face-to-face to happen, but our businesses are still unsure of how they're going to be able to accommodate students in a business for the whole program, because a lot of those people might be working from home. And actually, speaking to a school, we are looking at maybe doing more of a hybrid version. Some of those sessions taking place in the school, some of those sessions taking place in a business, and perhaps having one of those sessions virtually, for example, mock interviews on screen, that type of thing. So it's quite interesting the conversations I'm now having, and I can see me having more bespoke conversations with each school and business rather than just having the standard program, which is what used to happen before the pandemic used to happen. But those outcomes that we evaluated pre-pandemic, they're still there, and a lot of the programs that are currently still happening now, I'm still getting feedback from the schools and the students themselves that they are really getting quite a lot out of the program. So it's going to be interesting going forward how the program develops in terms of business needs and the school needs. Have I got another slide? Yeah, okay, so yeah, that's my details. Please, any questions? That's it for me. Sorry, I think I was rushing. I'm aware of time.
No, I know. Sorry, we all are as well. We've all got more to say than we think. Thank you so much, Carrie. That's wonderful. And yeah, it's interesting to think about those relationships developing. So any questions, do put them in the chats. We can always just finish those at the end, and we will send information around as we go on. Just some final reflections then from Rona Phelps from STEM Ambassadors. So thinking about, the work, the employers side of things as well, the connecting people. Rona, do take it away.
Okay, thank you. I'm aware of time, so I will keep it quick, and I haven't got a raft of slides, you'll be pleased to hear. So we manage the STEM Ambassador Programme. We're funded by UKRI, and we're part of the STEM Learning raft of organisations. In essence, we manage a program of volunteers. We very much rely on working with other people. We work with the employers, we work with UWE. And come March 2020, we have 3,000 volunteers who spend their time going into schools, not on a specific program. They all offer different things. They have different skill sets. They run workshops. Everything stopped. We had no schools, we had no activity, and we had to work our own way of how we could engage the people we worked with. We wanted to keep our STEM ambassadors engaged. We wanted to keep them involved with schools. The schools weren't there, and the schools went into a minor panic about what they were going to do without even considering what was going on outside them. So the first thing we did back in March was we set up Project Inspiration. So we got our wonderful STEM ambassadors to create short, sharp videos about a project relating to their work. So it wasn't part of a bigger program. We ran them as CREST projects. They were aimed at those year 10, 11 and 12s who were suddenly out of school, could potentially do a project that would give them UCAS points if that's what they were looking at, or an engaged project that schools could pick up and related to our STEM ambassadors and what they did. And we had 27 videos, I think, in the end, from different people, different employers, simple projects, bigger extended projects. They weren't highly processed videos. They were, simple, almost dirty, short videos of, this is what I do. Why don't you think about this? Here's a project idea. And then they were mentored through those projects. So schools picked it up as something that the students could do from home. They got mentoring from the STEM ambassador through the project. And it wasn't anything formal. It just worked because people were looking for things to do at that point in time. So since then, we've trained STEM ambassadors. We've provided training on how to develop virtual activities, how to present online, because it wasn't the skill set any of them had. It wasn't the skill set we had, to be fair. We've all worked our way around Teams and Zoom and any other platform that we can use. And some of our STEM ambassadors did a fantastic job. So earlier this year, we came up with our recognition scheme, so the Digital STEM Champions and Lockdown Legends. So we had 60 STEM ambassadors who between them did 600 hours of support in schools. They were our lockdown legends. They just, once we'd moved online and they discovered that schools were online, they could support schools in Scotland. Geography didn't come into it. So they could run their newly developed virtual workshops anywhere in the UK. We suddenly became this national programme. So what we've been doing over the past 3 weeks with the support of other people in this room is we've put on our Southwest STEM Fest. So that's the next slide. And we have about 70 employers running workshops for us. Some of them are careers focused, some of them are hands-on workshops, so we're relying on the students having sellotape and Pritt sticks in front of them to do the activities. I have been so impressed by watching STEM ambassadors just sitting in silence, knowing that somewhere else there's a class full of 10-year-olds playing with sellotape and doing something, and all they can do, you can't see them because it's, the cameras are all off, but they know that there's pandemonium somewhere else, and they're just sitting and waiting for the words "done" to come up in the chat. And some of them have been phenomenal, and I've been so impressed by the support of other people working with the STEM ambassadors. So we just have this cohort of fantastic people who want to support schools. And what we're going to do moving forward, I think, will be a blend of online, things do work, and face-to-face, because there are a lot of STEM ambassadors who've done nothing because they do want to work face-to-face. They don't want this forum. This is not where they're comfortable working with schools. So hopefully come September, there'll be a way of working with schools, getting back into schools, and we'll do a combination of both, working with people online, developing new activities, and going into schools, the excitement of going into schools. So that's where we are. We're hoping to build more relationships with more employers, get into more schools, support more young people. It's all about engaging the young people. And are we giving them that experience of employers in our own way, but not in a works experience formal setting? That's me done. See, short and sharp, Laura.
Wonderful, and a great summary. Thank you, Rona. So yeah, you said, I think we're all lockdown legends, aren't we? I think we all need that badge for continuing to do what we do despite all the challenges of the last year. So yeah, fantastic. Thanks so much to everybody for being here. Hopefully you've all learned something from all our speakers. The idea of this is sharing. We'll be in touch by the email list afterwards. do get in touch and kind of take people's models as well. As we said, that's the point of this, because the more young people we reach, the more we're helping them in this new hybrid way. I think that's the key thing. We'll be keeping the good bits of virtual and hopefully going back to the good bits of face-to-face as well. So thanks for being here. Any final thoughts, questions from anyone? And if you need to head off too, any final thoughts?
I just want to say thank you for the session. It's been really good. I know we would be open to hosting events and very much doing a priority on the face-to-face side of things, but we'd also look to augment it with the virtual stuff as well. So anything we can do to help out would be more than willing.
Wonderful. Yeah. And as I say, hopefully people have connected through this as well. Definitely Joanne will be in touch to think about this, how to help young people feel at ease, maybe us feel at ease as well. As Rona was saying, some of our STEM ambassadors need more training as well. So please do comment. If not, thank you very much for being here. And Anna will be in touch with you so we can connect as well. Thank you.
All right. Perfect. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Laura. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Bye.